I'm Emma Hartley. I'm 29 and I live in Columbus, Ohio. I work as a financial analyst, the kind of job people assume means I'm good with numbers and bad with surprises. Most days feel the same. I drive the same route, sit in the same office, eat lunch at the same table with coworkers who mostly talk about fantasy football or rising mortgage rates. It's steady, predictable. I used to like that. That Tuesday started no differently. I got to the office at 8:15 a.m. and buried myself in spreadsheets. Around 10:30, I stepped into the break room, poured some bad coffee, and settled back at my desk to review quarterly earnings. That's when my phone rang. Local number. No contact saved. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something tugged at me. Is this Emma Hartley? The voice was male, older, steady. I said yes, unsure why I already felt uneasy. The caller introduced himself. He ran a pawn shop over on Livingston Avenue. Said his name was Wallace. Told me he had something that belonged to my father. That's when my chest tightened. My father's been gone for nearly 3 years. He passed in the spring after a long battle with pancreatic cancer. He left behind a few things, but only one that really mattered to me. His Rolex. A silver submariner with a black dial and a tiny inscription on the back. I kept it in my desk drawer at work. I checked it just the day before, or at least I thought I had. The man on the phone said someone tried to sell a watch just like it. Same model. Same serial number. And he didn't feel right about it. He asked me to come in. He said it wasn't the kind of thing to explain over the phone. I don't remember ending the call. I just remember the room getting quieter, like everything inside me had stopped moving. My fingers shook as I opened my drawer. Empty. That's when the numbness gave way to something sharper. Panic. I grabbed my keys and left without even telling my boss. I needed to see for myself. Because if this was the watch I thought it was, something was very, very wrong. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there staring at the empty space in my drawer like maybe I was remembering things wrong. Maybe I'd put the watch somewhere else. Maybe I was being dramatic. But deep down I knew. It had always lived there, tucked beside my spare glasses and a photo of Dad at the beach, sunburned and grinning. The drawer was part of a daily ritual. I'd open it mid-morning, press my thumb over the back of the watch, trace the inscription with my nail. To Emma. May time always be on your side. Love, Dad. The words were small, almost invisible now, but I didn't need to read them anymore. I knew them by heart. He'd given me that watch 3 days before he passed. In a quiet moment when the nurses were gone and his voice was thin like tissue. He'd pressed it into my palm and told me, "This is yours now. Only yours." I'd held onto it like a lifeline through the fog of grief that followed. It was never about the brand or the value. It was about what he chose to leave behind. I reached the pawn shop in less than 20 minutes. The place was squeezed between a payday loan place and a vape store. A tired sign hung above the door, and the inside smelled like old leather and metal. Mr. Wallace met me behind the counter. He was in his 60s, maybe older. Short gray hair, pressed shirt, thick glasses. He greeted me with a nod and said I looked just like my dad. He didn't rush. He went into the back and returned holding a velvet box I hadn't seen in years. My heart stuttered. He opened it gently, and there it was. The submariner. Smaller than I remembered. A little dull around the edges. But still my dad's. Still mine. Mr. Wallace said a young man brought it in the day before. Said it was his to sell, acted casual about it. But the moment Wallace opened the box, he got suspicious. He told me he'd seen that watch once before. 15 years ago, my dad had pawned it for $3,000. Wallace remembered him. A quiet man, always honest, always paid back his debts. My father returned a month later, paid the loan plus interest, and said he hoped he'd never have to part with the watch again. Wallace didn't forget it, especially after seeing the inscription inside. I sat there in silence, the weight of that sacrifice pressing down on me. I'd been 13 when I got into St. James Academy on a partial scholarship. There were still fees and uniforms and books. Dad had told me he picked up extra shifts. Never once mentioned he'd pawned the only thing of value he owned. That's the kind of man he was. He did the hard things quietly. No drama, no guilt trips. Just quiet love in the form of choices no one ever saw. I ran my finger along the edge of the watch as Wallace told me more. He said he'd hesitated to finalize the sale. Something didn't sit right, so he stalled. Looked up the serial number, cross-referenced old records. When he found my name on the pawn receipt from all those years ago, he figured he should reach out, just in case. I thanked him, but my voice came out hollow. I wasn't ready to think about who had stolen the watch. All I could think about was Dad, what he'd given, what had been taken. Mr. Wallace didn't hand the watch over right away. He held it a moment longer, turning it in his thick fingers with a quiet thoughtfulness that made me pause. Then he said there was something else, something strange, something he hadn't seen before. He pressed the side of the watch gently right beneath the crown. A small click echoed faintly in the quiet of the shop. The back of the watch popped open like a secret door, revealing a shallow compartment I never knew existed. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned in. Inside was a piece of paper folded down to the size of a postage stamp and wedged into place with care. Wallace didn't open it. Said it felt too personal. Said something told him it was meant for me. My fingers trembled as I lifted it out. The fold was precise, like my dad had done it a dozen times to make sure it fit. I unfolded it slowly, trying not to tear it. Each layer felt like unwrapping a part of him I thought I'd already said goodbye to. Inside was a single line in my father's familiar handwriting. First National Bank, Box 232. My heart pounded. The bank was downtown, the same one where he'd taken me to open my first savings account when I was 10. The number meant nothing on its own, but somehow I knew it mattered. I could almost hear his voice in the back of my head. Calm. Steady. You'll know what to do when the time comes. Wallace said nothing as I read. He just watched me carefully, like he didn't want to break the moment. I asked him if he had seen this kind of thing before. He shook his head. Most watches don't have secrets built into them. But your dad, he said, seemed like the kind of man who didn't leave things to chance. I folded the paper back up and tucked it into my pocket like it was made of glass. My mind raced with questions. What could be in the box? Why hide it like this? And why tell me now after all these years? The watch had always been a symbol of his love. But maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was a message, a breadcrumb, the first step in a trail he hoped I'd follow. And for the first time since he passed, I didn't just feel his absence. I felt his presence, quiet, intentional, guiding me from somewhere I couldn't see. I held the note in my lap like it might dissolve if I blinked too hard. The letters were small, tight, unmistakably his. Emma, if you're reading this, something's happened to the watch. I need you to go to First National Bank, Box 232. The key is in my toolbox. You know the one. Inside the blue level. What's in that box is your future. Protect it. Trust yourself. My throat closed around a knot I didn't know I still carried. He'd written it for a moment just like this. For the day when someone tried to take something that was never theirs. He knew life could get complicated. He didn't just leave behind love. He left instructions, a plan, a quiet confidence in who I was and who I might need to become. Wallace cleared his throat gently. Said he didn't mean to pry, but he recognized the weight of what I was holding. Then he told me something I didn't expect. Years ago, back when I was just a kid, Wallace's daughter had been sick. Medical bills piled up and he was short on the rent. My dad heard about it through a guy at work and showed up one morning with a toolbox and a ladder. Re-roofed the place himself. Charged almost nothing. Said Wallace could pay him back whenever. Wallace never forgot that. Said he tried to return the favor with cash, but Dad wouldn't take it. Just shook his head and said, "Do right by someone else." So Wallace waited. And when that watch landed on his counter, he knew. This was the moment. His moment to settle a quiet debt. It hit me then harder than anything else. My father had been building something long before I ever knew how to name it. Not just a future for me, but a legacy of integrity, of kindness, of looking out for others when it counted most. He didn't need recognition. He just needed to know I'd be okay. I looked at Wallace, really looked at him. His eyes were tired, but there was something clear behind them. He hadn't called me because of the watch. He'd called me because he recognized what it meant, what it represented. And now I was holding more than a timepiece. I was holding a door my father had left open, a path he'd cleared one act of love at a time. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my fingers had stopped shaking, but my chest still burned. I walked in through the kitchen door, and there they were. My mother sitting at the counter, laptop open. Richard across from her, sorting through a mess of papers. They looked up startled. I set the Rolex on the counter between us. Neither of them said a word. The silence stretched. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I asked where they found the watch. Asked how it ended up at a pawn shop downtown. My mother blinked. Richard frowned. Then just like that, the lie cracked. Richard started talking. Said something about opportunity timing, how his son Zach had this new app, a real shot, and they needed seed capital. The watch was just sitting there. They figured I wasn't using it. I said nothing at first. Just listened. Let the weight of their words settle. They hadn't asked. Hadn't told me. Just opened my drawer, taken something precious, and handed it to a stranger like it meant nothing. I looked at my mom. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked if she knew. She nodded. Quiet, like it was some small mistake. Like it was no big deal. I reminded her what that watch meant. Reminded her how Dad gave it to me in the hospital. How he wore it through every season of our lives. How I kept it close, not for status, but because it made me feel like he was still here. She said times were hard. Said Zach was building something important. I asked what I was building. What I had ever taken from them. What I had asked for. She had no answer. Richard started talking about family. Said family shares things. That we don't put walls between each other. I asked if Zach shared his trust fund. If he split the profits when his last startup tanked. If they would have stolen from him the way they stole from me. Richard said that was different. Zach had vision. I had a paycheck. That was the difference. My voice stayed level. I told them I wanted the money back. All of it. Every cent of the $8,500. They looked surprised. Maybe even hurt. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I told them I'd already filed a police report. That the watch had been listed as stolen. That I could press charges. My mother gasped. Richard stood. But I didn't flinch. I told them this wasn't about the money. It was about respect. About the truth. about the fact that my father trusted me with something and they sold it behind my back like it was just another thing to trade for a maybe. They tried to explain, but I didn't want explanations. I wanted accountability. I gave them 1 week, 7 days. Either they returned the money or I'd let the police handle it. They tried to appeal to my heart, my childhood, our history. I reminded them that trust is history too, that what they did rewrote everything. I picked up the watch, slipped it back into my bag, and walked upstairs. That night I didn't sleep. I packed slowly, one drawer at a time. My childhood bedroom felt smaller than ever, but not because I'd grown, because the people I trusted had shrunk in my eyes. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay. The next morning I left before sunrise. The streets were still damp with dew. The city hadn't quite woken up. I pulled into the parking lot at First National just after 8:15 a.m. My fingers clutched the tiny key like it might vanish. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. This wasn't about them anymore. This was between me and Dad. The woman at the front desk looked familiar. She glanced at the key, then at me, and her face softened. Said she remembered my father. Said he used to come in wearing work boots and a smile. She led me through 2 locked doors and down a long, quiet hallway. Then she unlocked box 232 with her master key and stepped back. I turned my key slowly. The lock clicked. My hands were shaking. Inside was a manila envelope, a worn leather notebook, and a folded letter with my name written in his hand. I pulled out the letter first. The air felt still, like time had folded in on itself. I sat on the bench and opened it carefully. Emma, if you're here, then you found the watch and what I hid inside. That means something went wrong. I hate that. But I also knew it might happen. That's why I built this. Everything in this box is yours. It's not a gift. It's your backup plan. Because I wanted you to always have the freedom to walk away from anything that hurt you. I started saving when you were born, little by little. The envelope has bearer bonds. They're clean, transferable, worth about $100,000 now. The notebook holds all the unpaid invoices from my business. Some of these companies still owe. I kept records in case you ever wanted to collect. You don't have to, but it's yours. More than that, I want you to understand something. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about giving you time. Time to choose better. Time to breathe. Time to heal. Your mother means well, but she sees loud success. You're quieter, steadier. Like me. That doesn't make you less. It makes you rare. Tears blurred the page. I wiped them away with my sleeve. He'd seen me clearer in death than some ever had in life. The letter ended with one last line. You were always worthy of everything I had to give. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I folded the paper and held it against my chest. I opened the envelope next. Neatly stacked bonds labeled and current. My heart raced. The notebook came last. It smelled faintly of wood and oil like the garage where Dad kept his tools. The pages were filled with lists, contractors, jobs, outstanding payments, notes in the margins. Some names I recognized, others I didn't. One stuck out. Brighton Masonry, owed $15,000. Last payment date, never. It wasn't just money. It was evidence. Proof that Dad had built something, that his work had value, and that even in silence he never stopped protecting me. I closed the box and handed it back. The woman asked if everything was okay. I nodded. But inside something had shifted. This wasn't just about reclaiming a stolen watch. It was about seeing the full picture. My father hadn't just left me a memory. He left me freedom, options, a clean break from anyone who saw me as less. That box wasn't filled with paper. It was filled with purpose. As I drove home, I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity, a calm sense of knowing what needed to happen next. My time had been stolen, but now I had the power to take it back, on my terms, with the grace and grit he taught me to carry. By the following Monday, I was sitting across from a lawyer named Diane Vasquez in a sunlit office just outside downtown. She was sharp, mid-40s with a no-nonsense tone that made me feel safe the moment she started talking. I handed her the notebook, the bonds, and told her everything. Every piece. She didn't blink. Just nodded, took notes, and started running numbers. She told me the bonds were clean and easy to cash. The construction debts might take time, but they were real. Most of the companies were still operating, including one I hadn't expected. My stepfather Richard's name appeared on 2 of the invoices. Same signature, same handwriting. One for materials, the other for a project where he failed to pay my dad $15,000 after the job was done. Diane raised an eyebrow and asked if I wanted to pursue it. I said yes, without hesitation. I told her about the watch, the theft, and how Richard claimed they had no money to return. She didn't flinch. Just said, "Sounds like we've got leverage." She started preparing paperwork for 2 actions. One to reclaim the stolen watch funds. The other to collect the outstanding construction debt. It was all legal, all documented, all mine to pursue. As I left her office, the air felt clearer. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was focused. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just reacting. I was responding, with evidence, with strategy, with truth. And I wasn't alone. My father had laid the groundwork. All I had to do now was follow through. I didn't wait for another confrontation. I walked in on a Saturday morning calm and packed. My mother was in the kitchen sipping coffee. Richard sat beside her scrolling through his phone. They looked up when I came in with my suitcase. Neither spoke. I told them I was leaving. No drama. No arguments. Just facts. I'd found a place and was moving out today. My voice was steady. I said they'd hear from my lawyer next week about the watch and the debt, that everything would go through proper channels. Richard opened his mouth to object. I held up a hand. I wasn't asking permission. My mother asked where I would go. I said that wasn't her concern anymore. She tried to soften, said we could work it out, that this was all just a misunderstanding. I nodded politely, but the truth sat between us heavy and unchanging. I told her I wasn't walking away from family. I was walking toward peace. I picked up my last bag and turned toward the door. No hugs, no guilt, just a quiet goodbye. I paused before stepping outside, told them this. My father gave me more than a watch. He gave me the strength to know when enough is enough. Then I left. And for the first time in years, I didn't look back. About 4 months after I left, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name written in my mother's delicate handwriting. I sat with it on my kitchen table for almost an hour before I opened it. I wasn't sure I wanted her words, but some part of me needed to know what she'd say when no one was watching. It wasn't an apology, not in the way I expected. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to justify everything. Instead, she told me about her own silence, about how after Dad died, she felt lost in a world where everyone assumed she'd be strong, how she resented how easy I made it look, like grief never touched me the way it swallowed her whole. She wrote about Richard, about how he made her feel seen again, wanted, how she clung to that feeling because it made her forget just for a while that she was no longer the woman Dad had loved. She admitted she knew taking the watch was wrong, that it wasn't about Zach's future. It was about trying to prove she could still offer something valuable to someone, even if it cost her the last real thing tying her to me. She said she envied the bond I had with Dad, that it made her feel like an outsider in her own home, like the best parts of him were never really hers, that watching me keep his memory alive, protect it, made her feel small, not because I was cruel, but because she couldn't bring herself to do the same. I didn't cry reading it, not like I thought I might, but something in me softened. I saw her not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone who had broken under weight she didn't know how to name. It didn't excuse what she did, but it made me see the cracks more clearly. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer with Dad's journal, not to forget, not even to forgive, just to remind myself that pain takes many shapes, and sometimes people pass it on because they don't know what else to do with it. I live in a little house now, one with creaky floors, sun-drenched windows, and a garden patch I'm still figuring out. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Every corner of it carries a piece of me. A bookshelf I built, a mug my dad used to drink coffee from, a watch that rests quietly on my nightstand ticking like a steady heart. Most mornings I wake up around 7:15 a.m. I make tea, step out onto the porch, and listen to the stillness. No yelling, no negotiations, just quiet. I painted the front door last week, a warm red that reminds me of the toolbox my dad always kept organized. The old level he gave me hangs above the workbench in the garage. I like knowing it's still guiding things straight. Sometimes I reread his letter, not because I'm searching for anything new, but because it helps me remember how far I've come. There's a line I keep coming back to. That time is the only real currency we have. I didn't fully understand it until now. It's not just about minutes or hours. It's about who you give your time to, what you build with it, what you refuse to waste it on. I don't think I'll ever be the kind of person who forgives and forgets easily. But I have forgiven enough to stop carrying it around, to let peace sit where pain used to believe that even hard things can leave something gentle behind, like the way light falls through the window in the late afternoon, or the quiet tick of a watch passed down with love. This is the life I chose, not because it was handed to me, but because I fought for it, learned from it, protected it. And now I know that every second counts, every small choice matters, and no one gets to steal my time again. Not when I finally understand what it's worth.